Marianne, I hope you know that we'll be speaking like directly straight to you.
All right, the time is now 6 p.m., so we're going to go ahead and get started with our 2020 Student Government Vice Presidential Debate. I am your moderator and Election Commissioner, Emily Rudizich.
I am Jacob Smith, the editor of Local and Campus Politics with the Iowa State Daily.
Before we get started, I do want to wish a happy birthday to my dad, who is at home, and Josh Hanyang, too. But yeah, let's start with the opening remarks. I'll remind the candidates that they have 90 seconds for the opening remarks. We'll start with Schrader, then go to Hanyang, then Eisenstein, and we'll rotate with each question as we go for the debate.
Okay. Being a Cyclone is about seeing what needs to be done and doing it. When I moved into my dorm, I was the first one there, and I noticed a lot of the electrical outlet covers weren't installed. So I ran around on my floor and installed those myself because I didn't want students and their parents' first moment of Iowa State to be a room that wasn't completed. That's the attitude that I carry with me in student government. As an IRHA senator, I worked with the Department of Residence to make sure there weren't holes in the work order system. And when the city of Ames created a discriminatory proposal regarding student housing, I wrote a petition that got 3,000 signatures in 3 days that changed that proposal. As civic engagement chair, I worked with students, the university, and even the state government to make sure that our ISU IDs are eligible to be used in elections. And when a bill arose in the Iowa legislature that would have hindered student voting, I wrote an op-ed in the Des Moines Register that was the last round of bad press that bill got before it was killed. As vice speaker, there was a need, and I led an effort to create a Supreme Court that we could be proud of instead of just being a running joke, and that Supreme Court is on the ballot. I also saw a need for all students to have access to trained advising when it comes to the student conduct process, so I created the student advisors. Being a Cyclone is about seeing what needs to be done and doing it. And Morgan and I see clear needs in the areas of accessibility, or affordability, campus climate, and sustainability. And that's why we're going to do whatever we can, whether it's on our platform or not, to address those areas.
Good evening. My name is Joshua Hanyang. I'm a fourth-year student studying Management Information Systems at our Ivy College of Business. This past year, I've also had the privilege of serving as a senator for my college, addressing student needs throughout my constituency, and I hope to bring those needs to a wider campus audience as your next vice president of this university. Lydia and I believe our platform is best equipped to address student needs through 5 main points: diversity and inclusion, mental health awareness, green initiatives, student government transparency, and of course, ISU 101. One thing that I'm especially excited to share with you tonight is building our community, an event sponsored through the Ivy College of Business that I've worked on in the past and has seen generally positive student success, especially with campus climate issues that we see today. This event, when I first attended it, I wasn't very involved in student affairs, but I quickly found that the environment that was there created a personal relationship between my peers, myself, and my teachers and professors. This platform point and other platform points have been addressed with both administration and students. We want to bridge the gap between both of these parties in a time when communication is key for all members of our great college. We've spoken with students who feel underrepresented by student government, but we believe that our campaign today assesses the values of these students, and we invite you to raise the standard with us on March 3rd and 4th. Thank you.
Alrighty then. Well, good evening. My name is Daniel Eisenstein. I am currently a sophomore here at ISU. I am running for vice president of the student body. I'm currently studying management information systems with a minor in cybersecurity. I'm also currently a participant in the Air Force ROTC program. I must note that all opinions are entirely mine and not that of the program. I have also served as an employee at the computer support office at the College of Veterinary Medicine. So with all these experiences, I would like to personally help you, the student body, ensure that student government is operating in everyone's interest through 4 key tenets: transparency, accountability, sustainability, and of course, efficiency. Thank you.
All right, so we're gonna get into our topical questions. As a reminder for the audience, if you do have any questions, you can go to the link bit.ly/StuGovDebate 2020. It is case sensitive, so for each word, just make sure that you uppercase that.
Once again, candidates will have 60 seconds to answer these questions. If you are asked a follow-up question, you will have 45 seconds to respond, and you can rebut another candidate at any point. You just must raise your hand to alert us, and then we will let you. Starting with Senator Hanyang. What area do you see as needing the most improvement when it comes to campus climate and inclusion, and how would you address it?
Our first platform point, as I mentioned, was diversity and inclusion, and this year we've seen an unprecedented rise of students addressing these needs to both administration and to our student leaders. We as student government owe it to our student body in order to address these things through personal conversations, not just responding to what the students say. We want to hold both our administration accountable through personal events, through the Building Our Community, similar to what I mentioned earlier, which will take place in all academic colleges and departments, and through the addition of more inclusive committees like the LGBTQI+ Diversity Inclusion Chair, and maintaining the same relationship that we have with our students of various backgrounds across this university.
Eisenstein?
Oh, all right. My answer is a little bit more concise. I think we need to learn to treat one another with respect. Learn to judge people by the contents of their character, not the color of their skin. Personally, one small thing on campus that's had a large impact for me is some of the artwork on campus. For example, I know there's a small piece of art just south of McKay Hall. Depicts a woman on a man's shoulders, and I didn't know this, but it's supposed to depict them crossing the Rio Grande River. I think art just like that, most importantly, starts conversations, fuels new ideas, and most importantly, it lasts a lifetime. It's a good investment. So I don't see why a little bit of extra investment in that would hurt.
Schrader?
Yeah. Every year, new students come to Iowa State, and that's a new group of students that needs to be educated on how to interact in an environment where there's so many different cultures that are different than them. We need to make sure that when students come here, we have a cultural competency training that is multi-year, that encompasses what it takes to come to Iowa State and to interact with one another. Every year we see mistakes, from jokes that are in extremely poor taste, if you want to call them jokes, that just wouldn't happen if people would know better. And I think that, our platform has other ideas, but I think cultural competency training is really important because it captures that there's students here from all over the state, all over the Midwest, all over the country, and all over the world, and we need to know how to work together to make Iowa State, one community and live up to our principles of community.
Eisenstein, and then we'll go to
Just a
Hanyang.
short rebuttal. So take Alcohol EDU, for example. We mandate that all students complete that online course in order to quash ignorance. Teach students, for example, drinking an entire gallon of vodka at once is not a good idea. What I hesitate to understand is exactly how mandated cultural competency training would stop someone who wants to write anti-Semitic or racially insensitive messages on the sidewalks. I mean, I really don't think that they're acting out of ignorance, but just my opinion. Thank you.
Yeah, it's not going to stop, everyone, but it will stop, kind of this culture that we have on campus. There's always going to be people that are going to violate our principles of community. We need to make sure that we stand up and that student government is a strong voice for people, especially when those sorts of chalkings appear on campus. But what this does is it tries to address the broader problem. Alcohol EDU doesn't mean that people don't drink too much, but it means on the whole, they're more educated about the dangers that are associated with that. It's trying to educate just a little bit more than we're currently doing.
I would agree with Vice Speaker Schrader exactly that awareness is the root of this problem. When we had students come to our Senate meeting in the fall, their main issue was they were not heard. And so we can't account for every single student's actions. There will always be students who blatantly disrespect the rights of others. But what we need to do is, for those students who are unaware of their actions, we need to educate them right when they approach this university. Through Destination Iowa State, giving the students of identities, especially of LGBTQI+ identities, a place where they can interact with their communities, and also providing a course like ISU 101 for students where they can understand these things right when they're starting to take their classes. They'll be able to understand their peers a lot better.
Last semester, a temporary policy was enacted regarding the regulation of chalking on campus. Now, the university is moving towards a permanent policy that would ban chalking entirely on certain areas of campus and lift restrictions on others. Do you support this policy, and how much should the university manage students' ability to do things such as chalk on campus? Eisenstein.
Glad you asked me. Well, the chalk ban's got to go. No doubt about it. University is currently facing a lawsuit over it. It's not going to last. Unfortunately, we also know for a fact that we cannot discriminate. We cannot selectively erase what is written based on its contents, no matter how bigoted it is, no matter how appalled it makes me feel. We can't do that. So, in short, nix the chalk ban. But I also believe that we should allow students to erase whatever they choose to. That being said, I have the right to speak. You have the right to try to shut me up.
Schrader?
Yeah, so the old chalking policy was there was no policy. You can chalk wherever you want. Then that got out of hand. There was awful things written on the sidewalks. There was profanities. There were calls to violence. And the university created a temporary policy that banned all chalking. Now they have created a semi-ban that bans chalking on historic parts of campus and around medical facilities. So it's essentially just central campus that's banned from chalking. I don't really think the permanent policy accomplishes any goal that it sets out to do. If it's to set out is to protect students from these sorts of messages that interfere with their education, it doesn't do that because there's more than just central campus that students feel by. If it's to protect students' rights to free expression, then creating a free speech zone that's everywhere except for central campus isn't the answer. We'll see what the courts rule on if the university can even ban chalking in the first place, but I am currently against the permanent policy that is proposed by the university because it doesn't seem to accomplish any goals that it sets out to.
Anyang?
When this policy was first introduced to us as senators, I thought that the statement that this chalking must abide by the code of conduct was good and wise, but the rest of it did not appropriately satisfy the problem that we had. We had students who would come in and say that their safety and their education felt threatened at this university because of those chalking messages. And while we don't want to ban chalking altogether, we want to work with both this university and the Board of Regents so that we can come up with a solution that satisfies both the fairness issue and still protects those of marginalized identities.
In the fall of 2019, after repetitive instances of racist and xenophobic dialogue at Iowa State, Students Against Racism sat in on a student government meeting to voice their concerns for their students, for their safety and well-being. If elected, how would you ensure that all students at Iowa State feel included and safe? Schrader?
Yeah, and I am extremely happy that we were able to provide a space for those students to share their lived experiences at Iowa State. And not only that, but myself, I know Senator Hong Yang went around as well to ensure that it wasn't just them coming to us, but we were going to them. But it's important, and the voices they raised is we wanted to be proactive, and they wanted to make sure their voices were in the room. When our current Diversity and Inclusion Director of Student Government, Elena Hoffman, mentioned that she doesn't think that her committee is fully representative of all the voices, I wrote a bill to expand that committee. And when we build our cabinet, we want to make sure that we have as many voices from as many different communities as possible. And even after that, we want to make sure that when we're writing policies, we think about all the different groups this could affect and that groups aren't forgotten about. Because that is the problem that has happened, and that's what those students shared, is that they felt forgotten about by the university and by student government, and that should not be allowed to happen again.
I've been a part of this conversation since the students came. I mentioned before that this conversation that we had with the Students Against Racism was very, very emotional, and I really hope that everybody that was here reflects on that night as a night where people came and they shared their stories and shared their emotions about this. At the end of the day, we need to ensure that we're staying committed to those emotions that those students shared. While emotions, however, are still very abstract, we want to put it into action. So when Schrader mentioned about the cabinet being expanded, that's exactly the points that I will be making as vice president and Lydia will be making as president. We also do want to be out talking to the students about these issues right from the get-go, even more proactively than we did this fall. We want to be out tabling in our constituencies for senators and understanding these student concerns so that these issues are quelled before they even occur.
Thank you. So in order to sort of quash the racism on campus, I think it's mostly a game of messaging and communication. For example, the meeting with Students Against Racism, I thought was incredibly enlightening, getting to listen to everyone's stories. I think we need to make it very clear that bigotry is not welcome on this campus through continued messaging and, of course, through action. For example, expanding the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, which I applaud you for. Yeah, thank you.
Promoting student mental health is often discussed on campus. How will you ensure that every student feels welcome and open to express themselves and have access to the help that they may need? Starting with Tanya.
Our student counseling services was one of the most valuable resources at Iowa State, yet it still remains one of the most underutilized on our campus. I've had many students who have come to me and said they feel uncomfortable or just flat out stigmatized by going to these places because they feel that the process of waiting, filling out forms is too much for them to seek out help. We want to reform that by creating an automated form online so that students can discuss their concerns about mental health from the privacy of their own home, so that students feel like they can actually share what's going on without being pressured by anyone else, but still providing the resources so that they can approach their own mental health struggles in the first place.
Eisenstein?
Mm-hmm. Well, I find no doubt that care for mental health issues are a huge investment and definitely a worthwhile one. Now, I've personally heard of few too many horror stories of people trying to access mental health care on campus and being rushed into group therapy a little too quickly simply because they just didn't have the faculty resources to care for everyone appropriately. So, yeah, thank you.
Schrader?
Yeah, I think, what's been mentioned is that, we do have resources on campus. We need to make sure they're adequately staffed, but we need to make sure students know about them. We have free counseling available to us as students. Maybe it could be better, but that's free counseling, and that's better than most people in this country are able to get. And we want to be sure that where there's no stigma in going and using those resources, we already pay for those resources. It's just making sure that students that need them are able to use them. And going with making sure there's resources, I lobbied as part of a Big 12 coalition in Washington, D.C. to make sure that there was more access and more grants for mental health funding coming to universities like Iowa State. So when we have these giant increases of students that need therapy, that need mental health resources, that we're able to back that up and provide students with those needs.
Senator Hanyang?
I would like to just mention that we can have all the funding for mental health resources that we would like, but unless students are aware of those resources, they will never be used and it will be money wasted. So we need to make sure that the students understand the ease of these services in order to get them, especially when they're in times of crisis.
Okay. We will now move on to our topics of student wellness and sustainability, starting with Senator Anyang again. Promoting student mental health is often discussed. All three of the candidates represented here today enlist sustainability as an important initiative for their campaign. What are some sustainable practices your administration would hope to implement? Senator Anyang.
This last year, the senators, Lydia was a part of this, created a bill to introduce solar lighting to this campus. And solar lighting is now one of the most cheapest renewable energy sources that our university can have. And I think it's a good idea to continue pursuing these sort of initiatives in our student government, because if we're the ones telling the administration that they need to pursue it, they're more likely to listen to us and to the students who would be helping develop these resources.
So I think when trying to introduce new sustainable practices on campus, it's important to remember how much money are we spending. Now, one of my friends and I actually did recently discuss a potentially cost-negative solution. One idea we had would be to grow a small prairie just south of the library, similar to that which is north of Science Hall. Ultimately, it would be less land for FP&M to have to deal with, so it could actually save money in the long term. Not to mention, it's a prairie, it's beautiful, it'd be great for the animal species on campus. What's not to love?
Yeah, when it comes to sustainability, this is something that Morgan and I have taken very seriously. We've even talked to the director of FP&M to figure out what is possible at Iowa State and what do we have the facilities for. Something we have the facilities for is composting. We use paper towels that are compostable, but they just go in the trash and get burned with the rest of the trash in Ames. We need to separate those out. Why are we using compostable paper towels if we're not composting them? The other thing I've been a part of is on SciRide. We are transitioning from diesel buses that get 2.5 miles per gallon to hybrid and electric buses. And those electric buses take 148,000 pounds of carbon out of the air every year. FP&M also has a climate plan that has a 50% reduction in carbon emissions over the next 10 years that the university hasn't yet adopted and is still working around the edges. Morgan and I are going to push the university to adopt that plan and start working on it as soon as possible because we don't have time to waste.
All right, we're going to move on to our third topic of the night, student government retention and transparency. The student government budget, which for the 2019-2020 school year accounted for $2 million, comes from student activity fees, a fee that every student pays as part of their U-bill. With declining enrollment rates, how do you plan to address a smaller budget? Starting with Eisenstein.
How do I plan to address a smaller budget? Well, you can start by saving money. And on the topic of student government retention, I would like to try to make the meetings a lot faster. If you couldn't tell, I'm a very concise speaker. Thank you.
Yeah, so when it comes to cutting our budget, we need to make sure that those budget cuts are broad-based and that they're about closing loopholes that we maybe currently have in our funding system that we were able to afford but maybe can't afford now. But we need to make sure that any budget cut is talked through with the club or whoever is going to be receiving that to make sure that they're aware, they understand, and that we're not just doing things blindly. We need to be transparent. We need to do it out in the open. With student government retention, I think that I don't have the data for how many senators are running again this year, but I do know that more senators than ever are showing up to student government meetings and are participating in those meetings, and I know because I keep track, because I care about making sure that student government senators are engaged when they're in the room. And that's something that I've been proud of, is the moment I got in Senate leadership, I sat down and I met with every senator to make sure the mentor-mentee program was there and to figure out their goals so I could try and help assist, because senators need to be engaged in order to retain them in the first place.
About budget cuts, I do believe that our Senate needs to take these into account, and we have already seen those issues this year. We also need to make sure that club presidents, treasurers, and those organizations are fully aware of all the financial situations that this university has, and that we're providing the resources for them to understand that. Students deserve to know about our funding processes even before they come to our finance committee meetings and our Senate meetings. So we hope to provide more information about those through packets, through fireside chats, and through a hotline that will actually answer questions and get students to the resources and the people they need. About student government retention also, we believe that it is important that students both inside Senate are coming back and that we are getting new, fresh insights as well. We want to make sure that it's not just the senators who are coming in and expanding their leadership skills, but that we also have people who have equally valuable input in our university and its processes.
Once elected, how will you ensure that the incoming senators will be active within their constituencies and represent them vigilantly? Schrader?
Yeah, the easy question answer is just, we're going to be there, we're going to be present, and we're going to meet with them and make sure that they feel engaged. But the other part of that question is, that's the job for the next speaker and vice speaker. As the current vice speaker, I took that as my job, that we need to make sure that senators are engaged, that they're going to their constituencies, and we kind of stopped letting things slide. We used to be, we don't actually have to do this, it's in the rules. And I said, no, this is in the rules, we're going to do it. And I think that's why we've seen Senate be more engaged this year. And I am so willing to sit down with the next vice speaker and kind of talk through, what did I do, what went well, what didn't go so well, so we can make sure that Senate is as effective as possible, because we are two equal branches of the student government.
While I believe that Senate has been more effective in reaching out to the constituents this year, there's still a lot of room that we can grow in. We can go out to our communities and table within them, like I did this last year with Senator Jack Bender, who's sitting in the front row. And we went and talked to our constituents and actually asked them, what are ways that student government can improve, and what are ways that our college can improve? Now, I know that not every constituency is academic, but I believe that we have our office hours as senators also be a way for us to go and outreach to students. That's important. So we need to provide options for our senators and require them to go out, talk to their constituencies, talk to their constituency councils, and talk to the administration that governs over them.
Well, I think increasing student government senator engagement starts with increasing student-to-student government engagement. For example, every now and then when my running mate and I are outside campaigning, I get the question, what does student government even do? And that disappoints me a little bit, that student government is not actually reaching out to students and making it clear what they're capable of doing. If we were to make the student body more engaged within student government, I think they would be more selective with their student government senator elections. And in turn, you get more senator engagement as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question. So how would, student government elections are done by the students, so how would you do that more selectively if it's just a general election?
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question.
Individual senators are elected by the student bodies,
Yeah.
so we have to trust the students to elect good senators.
Precisely.
So in your answer, you said that you wished it was more selective.
I wish students were more selective, that students actually knew what they were voting on.
Okay.
For example, I believe the voter turnout rate for the last election was 15%. I find that a little disappointing,
I hope students make the right decisions when they vote for senators.
of course.
Anyang, did you have a follow-up?
I did. One of the ways that we can increase this, the number of students who are interested in running for a senator position is actually going out and tabling for them. The year I ran for a College of Business senator's position, there were only 2 people who ended up on the ballot because they were committed to the process. That was Jack and I. This year, we have 4 students who are interested or who have already applied for this position, which means we effectively doubled it, and I know there's many more who were interested in those elections as well. So if we as senators go out and talk about what we do and gain some excitement from the students about this leadership position and how it can grow us and our constituencies, then I believe that we'll see more retention and more people bringing their ideas into Senate.
All campaigns have stated that they want to be leaders and represent all students at ISU. Students have the most direct engagement with student government during the 2-day student government election period. However, only 15% of the total student population votes. With the public largely uninformed about the mission and responsibilities of student government, how will you promote awareness of student government's role and encourage student engagement, starting with Anyang?
It starts with being a student. Going into your classes and talking about your roles outside of the academic world is pretty important to me, and it's something that I always do. Whenever I'm in my 8 a.m. class with other management information system students, I'm always talking about the next things that we're doing with student government, even if it's not related to elections. So the day that the chalking policy came out, for example, I instantly messaged all of my constituents in both my constituency council, one of my multicultural groups, and a lot of my friends in those classes so that they were aware of these things right when they came out. We understand that a lot of what the student government website does also is to provide those resources to students. We also want to point them in the right direction. So knowing where all of our legislation is kept, knowing where those Senate streams are, and summarizing them in a way that makes the average student not have to go through all the terminology.
Oh, okay. As I said before, the student government needs to try harder to reach out and market to different students. For example, I know we mentioned earlier the fireside chat videos that are published, I believe, every month. Last I checked, the most recent one had 750 views, which I find to be a little disappointing. One of the things my running mate and I want to try to accomplish would be little weekly bulletins in the Iowa State Daily that depict each and every little decision that student government makes, along with links to more information if desired. It's probably boring. Most students are probably just going to skim it over, but it's outreach regardless.
Yeah. Sorry, can you repeat the question? One sec, I think. Yeah.
Would you like the whole
Go
bit,
for it.
or-
Thank you.
All campaigns have stated that they want to be leaders and represent all students at ISU. Students have the most direct engagement with student government during the 2-day student government election period. However, only 15% of the total student population votes. With the public largely uninformed about the mission and responsibilities of student government, how do you promote awareness of student government's role and encourage student engagement?
Yeah, I think that students know what student government is through the projects or the inspirational things that we accomplish. Many students may not know specifically what was behind it, but they know when campus improves. I mean, the solar trash compactor trash cans were funded by student government at one point. Every student knows those exist, but they might not know exactly that student government was behind them or that it did it. And that's a little problem, but I think the big what we should focus on is making sure that students, are aware of the projects we're doing and that they can be a part of them and come and make campus, better through student government. That's why on affordability we have things like income share agreements, which would affect broad swaths of the student body and would make sure that students, maybe if they don't know student government, they at least know our impact and they were benefited by it.
I have a follow-up question for Eisenstein. So you mentioned that you and your running mate would want content published in the Iowa State Daily at the end of each week, recapping it.
That is correct.
Content in the Iowa State Daily is determined by students who are completely separate of student government and the university administration itself. It is a individual, independent, student-run organization, and student government doesn't exactly get to decide what is pushed in,
Right.
published in it.
I understand that, but is what student government is doing not exciting enough to publish? I'm just kidding. If they don't want to work with us, we can publish it of our own means.
Okay.
I think Senator.
Senator Onyang?
That's fine. Just 2 points I'd like to address. First of all, I believe that the Iowa State Daily does do a good job of disseminating the information that student government has. While that might not be the most exciting information, because not all of it is, we do want to keep it out there so that the students are informed above all else. Second of all, while the fireside chat videos have been, a relatively new initiative taken by this last presidency, we also do want to make them more engaging for students so that we do get our viewership up and that students actually do know what is going on, because social media is the way that students are communicating now.
All right, moving on. Any student who, while not interested in becoming a senator but wants to become involved with student government, still has the opportunity to apply for a position on Senate committees, executive cabinet, election commission, and the judiciary, among others. What actions will you take to promote and fill these vitally important positions, starting with Eisenstein?
Well, step one is outreach, of course, alerting people that these positions are actually available. Tell them what sort of qualities we're looking for. And fingers crossed, people will apply.
Yeah, I think, so we'll create a Google form for our cabinet positions that will have the positions listed as people have done in the past and advertised through mass emails, through student government social medias, through any personal channels that we can find to make sure that information gets out there. A difference we'd like to do is students might open that form and be like, well, what the heck does the Senior Director of Government Affairs do? And I think we should include, descriptions and, estimated hours of work associated with each of those positions, so students might be more willing to actually check those boxes as opposed to ones they might not understand what they are.
First of all, we want to lay a base for our students so that they can get involved from student government from even those committee level positions. Being part of Public Relations Committee this last year, I saw students ranging from seniors to freshmen who both wanted to get involved in their campus leadership at this point. Those younger students are essential for gaining both senators through retention and then also being able to share their own ideas as they continue their education here. So we do want to have those Google Forums, have those outreach events for students so that they can learn more about them, but we also want to show them the benefits that student government has through just tabling and through the projects that we do that are actually exciting and applicative for students.
All right, we're going to move on to specific candidate questions. You'll still have 60 seconds to answer each question. These questions are taken based off of your campaign, you as an individual, or from your website. So starting with Eisenstein, your campaign is proposing to publish the student government budget on the student government website. However, this information is already freely accessible by the public on the Student Government Finance Committee page through the GSB Online Finance Program website. The student government has published its annual budget every year since 2008. How is your proposal to publish the student government budget on the website different than what is already currently available?
I guess I just didn't do a good enough job looking for it. Honestly, I guess in that case, just make it more available.
I do want to mention that the fact that Daniel wasn't able to find that does show a problem about our funding procedures. And we do need to make that information more accessible, but the way that we do that is by breaking it down into a way that's just not online in a table format. We do want to have packets and include that information in our fireside chat so that students know what the important bits are, but that also that they are able to access the full data if necessary.
Yeah, and OFP is a really old website. It's kind of hard to navigate even if you do know it exists. It's so old, you called it GSB, which was the old name for student government. It hasn't been updated, and our current finance director, Madison Mueller, is working on creating an updated version. I mean, we can see our old student government website compared to the new one that was created under the current administration is miles better and has improved student access to student government, and we want to do the same thing for OFP and continue the process that our finance director has started.
All right, next for Schrader. Your campaign is proposing income-shared agreements based upon a program currently offered by Purdue University as an alternative to students taking out loans to pay their tuition. The program offers students the opportunity to receive funding by completing an agreement in which a student agrees to pay back a set percentage of their post-education salary over an established number of years. How successful is this program, and how do you plan to implement it at Iowa State? And will the university be funding this process, with it being available to all students regardless of income level?
Yeah, so I think this, given by how much Purdue is advertising it, what on their website they have a couple hundred students. I think over 500 students now in their program. The University of Utah is currently in a pilot program that includes students who opt into this program, pay 2.85% of their income over the next 3 to 10 years, depending on how much they borrow. I mean, this is something that improves college accessibility or affordability, and we want to make sure that Iowa State is at the front of this trend. When it comes to is it Iowa State's money, the goal would be to be a mix, to be some of Iowa State's money, but to be mostly private investors who are looking for low-risk investments that also propel education in this state further.
This one's for Han-Young. Your campaign plans to implement a program called ISU 101, which would include inclusivity training and provide students with resources for students on topics such as alcohol EDU and sexual assault prevention training. What else would this program offer to students that would not be in the form of an online Canvas training? What would this program look like?
With this course, we want to understand that students learn best from students. So we want to have students being able to share their stories about campus resources, about mental health awareness, about those identities that they share as well. So that students not only have that Canvas portion for their alcohol EDU, for the sexual assault training, but also for things that they may not actively seek out and they may not be introduced to right away. So our orientation program and our Destination Iowa State program does do a good job at introducing these things, but we also do want to maintain that students are learning these things right as they're experiencing college as well.
Yeah, and I might be able to have some good news. This is really similar to a program that student government has been working on for a while, creating a new orientation class. When Cole Stout ran on it in 2016, it was called Cyclone 101, and that has transformed along the way into a new student onboarding process called University Studies 123X that is offered next fall for incoming students. I mean, so we have an opportunity, and I think that it's important to make sure that after this first group of students go through, we reevaluate the criteria. But that's, this is something that I'm proud to work on back in 2017 when we were getting feedback for it, and I'm really excited on the work that New Student Programs has done to create this new onboarding system.
And in talking with Sarah Merrill, who's also been working with this new student onboarding program, we do want to maintain that this program stays optional for these first students so that students aren't reducing or aren't increasing the amount of time that they're staying at college, but that if students, even if they're not in their first year, are able to access these resources maybe for the first time in their educational careers.
All right, next for Eisenstein. Your campaign proposes to streamline bureaucracy by conducting a review of all committees in student government to ensure they are performing their intended function and take necessary steps to correct their flaws. Considering having no experience in student government prior, if elected, how would your administration determine if a committee is performing their intended function, and what specific steps would be implemented for committees deemed flawed?
Well, I think step one is to actually fully understand what each committee does. As far as I could tell, I found it very difficult to find really any information as to what the specific functions of a committee are. We will definitely go over each one. We'll make sure it's published, make sure it's available to all students, and then react appropriately based on popular opinion.
Did you have a rebuttal?
Yeah. I believe that all the committees here, it would be good to review their function, but I don't think anything necessarily needs to change because they all occupy a specific space within student government. For example, our finance committee, like we mentioned, does make the hard decisions about student organization funding, and we're glad to have them around to give us advice about funding bills that come. Our public relations committee is the one that's out and giving outreach to students. Our civic engagement committee is getting people to vote in not only in these elections, but also in elections that are in our community. And other committees that could go on and on, but I don't have time, are benefiting the student body in ways that aren't always seen by the student population.
I have a follow-up question for Eisenstein. So on the student government webpage, under the committees, it gives a description of all the committees, listing what they do, member responsibilities, as well as the goals of the committee on the website. Is what you're saying that the information listed here are not specific enough and not sufficient enough, or?
I guess once again, I just didn't look hard enough. Oops.
All right.
All right, Schrader. Within your ideas about campus climate, you suggest Know Your Rights sessions to expand students' knowledge regarding their rights. Under your administration, what would those sessions look like, and how would students obtain information if unable to attend?
Yeah, and this is something that we really just want students to have the information regarding their rights that are protected because Iowa State is a public university. Maybe this is a session at orientation led by student legal that student government provides. There are 2 attorneys that provide free legal advice for students. They could lead sessions. They've expressed a willingness to do so. Otherwise, maybe that time frame doesn't fit out, and there's a new email campaign called Year One, WON, that new student programs is starting. Maybe that information is just in there, or maybe it's in the booklet that is given out at orientation. We just want students to have this information, and we're ready to work with whoever in the university to make sure that happens.
Currently, in our Destination Iowa State program, there is a session called One Cyclone that does address these issues of campus climate and how to better live with your community. However, this program is still not mandatory for students, so we would like to provide the opportunity for them to attend this, and in Destination Iowa State, provide students of different identities to interact with people who they might feel more comfortable with. This isn't to take away from their general experience as a Cyclone and their welcome into Iowa State, but rather so that they are given the opportunity to start those connections from day one. And then we also do want to maintain these conversations in a personal manner throughout the rest of their college careers, so that they're having these sit-down conversations where students are able to not just get information, but get personal stories and get experience and knowledge about these issues.
For Hanyang, your campaign has suggested a few different measures towards sustainability practices. How would you work with the university to expand solar lighting on campus?
We would continue to work through our Green Initiatives Committee and through the funding projects, budget of special projects to enable to finance these. We also do want to make sure that our different departments that take up Iowa State, so Department of Residence, ISU Dining, all of our collegiate colleges are able to understand the gravity that we are in a climate crisis. We have to understand that all of our universities need to address this issue. We also need to be able to have our products that we give out be sustainable, so looking at those further and addressing waste where it is.
Eisenstein rebuttal.
Yeah, just a quick question for you. Could you explain to me why it cost $20,000 just to purchase 3 lampposts? Why there weren't any receipts attached or anything?
So, a couple things. First of all, that came from our special projects account, which there's more than enough money to be sitting there for that initial investment. I'm sure you know as a business major that in order to have these sort of projects, you have to take a little bit of cost up front, and that the cost that is reduced over time actually allows you to save money. So we are looking at the long term. At the short term, that price tag might seem a little high, but if we're looking at the benefit that it has to students over the years, I think this is a worthy investment.
Yeah, something that's brought up every year in student government is some spots of campus are so dark that people don't feel safe. Not only did this bill address sustainability, but it addressed safety. And it made sure that people who walk around on campus don't have to pick their path, or there's just one area where they feel lit enough that they can go study late at night. And that's really important. 20 grand for 3, permanent fixtures, while it may seem like a lot of money, is not a lot for things that are durable, that are gonna last for a very long time. It doesn't help sustainability or safety if they blow over in the wind. We want to make sure that these are quality and that they will serve the both intended purposes and I was proud to vote for that bill. Yep.
All right, for Eisenstein. On the 30th of October, 2019, the night that Students Against Racism sat in at a student government meeting to speak about issues regarding campus climate, in response to a student's concern that the allowing of a firearms weapon on campus would increase the rates of violence on campus, you stated, "Why would they care about an honor-based weapon restriction that, let's be honest, they're committing murder? I don't think that they would care too much about being expelled from this institution anyway." Do you still stand by this? Is the allowance of a firearm weapon a policy you would hope to enact if elected?
Okay, well, first let me separate what my opinion is and what I think is possible. My opinion is if you can legally engage in activity off campus, you should be able to legally do so on campus as well. Now, I personally don't think an honor-based weapon-free policy is going to deter someone who is inclined to commit murder. Now, what do I think is possible to accomplish if I were elected? It would not be easy to remove the weapons restriction on campus without changing policies on both a Board of Regents and an institutional level. However, the Board of Regents does allow for universities to make small exemptions or policy changes. For example, I would like to see a point A to point B exemption for, say, Ames residents that use Cyride to commute, need to travel through campus without stopping. I think they should be able to legally carry a firearm with them.
Schrader, your campaign has proposed an expansion of the grant program that incentivizes the use of the Open Education Resources program by professors at ISU. Open Education Resources offers a low-cost alternative to students when purchasing course books. Where would the additional grant funding be found, and how would your administration implement it?
I think we should, look, wherever we can. I think the student activity fee is a good purpose for that, and in expanding it, if we can find donors, we should find donors. But let's be clear. Every $500 grant that puts a textbook online for free, that then 100 students take that class every semester, saves many, many times more money than it costs to do. This is one of the most cost-efficient programs and the most effective ways we have to reduce the cost of education at Iowa State, and we want to do what we can to make sure that that is expanded as far as we possibly can go.
For Anyang, your campaign has proposed a sponsored change in the diversity credit requirement at Iowa State from 3 to 6 credits to reduce campus climate issues. What evidence can you provide to demonstrate that such an increase in the credit requirement would reduce these issues as stated? Does an increase in the credit requirement unduly burden a student financially or otherwise?
We want to maintain that this kind of change is something that will address a lot of the campus climate issues. So for your question specifically about does it create an undue burden on students, we want to maintain that these courses are reviewed by both faculty senate and by the provost's office so that they can be implemented into our curriculums. We also need to realize that it goes back to an issue of awareness for these students. Oftentimes in high school, students necessarily will hear about these things only in a social studies class. So we want to have these conversations that students can understand each other of different backgrounds, and we want to make sure that it's put in a way that students aren't taking more classes than they would necessarily need, and so that these courses would also be taken as humanities credits and other courses and other requirements for their graduation.
I have a follow-up to that. Given that this would disproportionately affect part-time students, which, according to the Office of the Registrar, would cost most majors at least an additional $1,000, how would you plan to offset that?
Our campaign would like to look at getting, again, student government to provide awareness but not funding. So we would look to the university and the provost's office in order to offset this cost, and we would continue to talk with them so that we can bring in grants outside of this university, especially those of protected groups that represent those protected identities, so that we do not see a strain on this university in time of decreasing enrollment.
All right, before we get into questions given by the student body, we're going to take a 5-minute interval. So take a break, get some water, and we'll be back at it. right, we're going to get back to it. So, from our questions from the audience, our first one comes from Finance Director Mueller, and she asks, do you have any new ideas for the student government fee? What does student government not do now that you would like to see done with the money or with the handling of the funds? And we'll start with Schrader and go down.
Yeah, we currently have a large special projects account from money that has accumulated in extra places over the years. And I think that maybe this is the wrong time to start looking at expanding to what student government is funding, especially as our fee revenue is going to be down 11% next year. I think we need to take tough decisions about what exactly is student government for, what is that student fee for, and what class of activity or club is that supposed to be funding. So I think the importance with the fees is making sure that students actually know what they're going towards, not just the student government fee, but all of the fees. Students pay $1,200 in fees every year, and there's no way to figure out where that money goes currently. That information needs to be online with descriptions of what those fees pay for, because if those fees are controlled by students, students ought to know what the heck they're going towards.
I'll agree with what Vice Speaker Schrader said. It's all about how we're being transparent about that money. We need to have it online. We need to be able to break down exactly where that money goes to and what projects it funds. In addition, our special projects budget does need to value the health and unity of our community, and all of the clubs that come in need to be fully aware that we are going through a time with decreasing enrollment and need to be understanding, and we need to understand them in what they need and how we can work with them to better serve all the students and all their passions.
I absolutely agree. I also think we can start with a little bit of extra outreach on a most basic level on our U-bill every semester, having the $35 fee actually written separately on the U-bill.
The next question is directed at you, Jacob. The president and vice president of the student body at ISU, the largest university in the state, are influential positions in the state of Iowa as the voice of tens of thousands of students. Central to your campaign is lowering costs for students, yet you provide list working for Governor Reynolds, who as governor or as lieutenant governor oversaw massive disinvestment from our public universities, leading to the large tuition increases we have all experienced these last few years. What is your plan to affect the real burden on students' tuition?
I mean, let's be clear about this. The reason tuition is increasing is because a decrease in investment from the state legislature. Now, Governor Reynolds has proposed fully funding Iowa State University this year, but that doesn't mean I'm optimistic. We need to make sure that student government is there at the Capitol, when this budget bill is in subcommittee and public comment is accepted. We need to make sure that, we're present and we have a force, and students around this university know who exactly to hold responsible. We have people from every county and every district in the state here at Iowa State, and we need to mobilize those students to make sure that our budget doesn't keep getting cut. What I did in Governor Reynolds' office was I helped Iowans with their problems. I answered the phones. I worked on felon restoration rights. And through that experience of just listening to Iowans' problems and trying to find the right way we could connect them to the correct solution, that's an experience that I value, and that's an experience that I want to serve Iowa State students with as well.
This next question is for all of the candidates here today. Do you have a plan to help students with substance abuse problems on campus, and if so, how? And we'll start with Tanyang.
Part of both our mental health platforms and our ISU 101 platforms will address the substance abuse problem. We do know that the Alcohol EDU course has some material about substance abuse. We do want to expand that and provide resources for student wellness. In addition, we do realize that oftentimes students who are struggling with mental health will turn to substances in order to cope, but we do want to provide those resources so that our student counseling and our Thielen Student Health Center is caring and understanding of those students as well.
Again, outreach is critical. I have seen a few student wellness flyers claiming that they can offer assistance for substance abuse. However, I've only ever seen one, and that's right outside the Student Wellness Center in Friley Hall. So, as I said, it really all comes down to outreach.
Yeah. think building a strong cabinet, and that includes having a strong director of health and wellness that can continue student government's involvement in programs that already exist, like the sobriety tailgates that the university puts on during football games. I think these sorts of events are really important, and student government should continue to be involved in them.
The next question is for all the candidates as well. If the student fee were cut, what organizations and services would you support removing or reducing? Starting with Eisenstein.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
If the student fee were cut, what organizations and services would you support removing or reducing?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily support removing anything, rather simply reducing situations where money is given out without really good justification attached. For example, if a student organization wants to host an event, we would like to see either receipts from years prior or solid price quotes.
Yeah, I think that it starts with looking at student government's budget. Do we need to make sure that we need everything that we have? I remember a bill that was brought up that funded a laptop for the Speaker of the Senate. Both myself and Speaker Culbertson said, hey, we don't really need this. We could save money, and it still passed with 2 votes against it. I mean, that sort of thing is budgets that if we don't need it, we don't need to spend money on it. And as well as I want to make sure that when we look at broad-based cuts, that we try and make sure that the student activity fee goes towards supporting activities that impact the broadest range of students.
Eisenstein?
Yeah, I had a look at that bill as well. I just want to ask if you know why they had to be MacBook Airs specifically?
Because we had to buy it through the university, and the university bookstore is like a Mac partner.
Okay, then.
Yeah, there's a lot of weird rules in this place.
I think that student government does need to look at its own budget before looking at the budgets of others, because our first priority is to serve students. However, we have to also realize that our priorities and criteria for students is also one of those places where budget cuts can take place. In this last few weeks, we've also seen cuts in those areas. And while it's very hard to tell students that their conferences or trips or that the things that they can fund through student government needs to be limited, we also have to make sure that those are not disproportionately affecting students who are underrepresented by our student government.
Last semester, there were several instances that resulted in the Students Against Racism protest. What can be done to improve discourse on campus to lessen these types of incidents, starting with Schrader?
Yeah, I think that we kind of already touched on it on cultural competency training. So I won't go into that extremely again, but I think it is about as the student body president and vice president, we need to go out and make sure that the principles of community are out in Iowa State, so we actually are a community. I mean, those are ideals that student government passed and reintroduced recently to make sure that Iowa State is a campus where everyone could feel welcome. I mean, this is why that I went to clubs last year and talked about the principles of community along with then President Julian Neely, because it was really important to make sure that that information got out to as many students as possible, because if they don't even have the information, if they don't have the follow through, what are the principles of community? What are they for? How can we expect students to live up to them?
I think our principles of community are great established ideas about how our students can live at this university. However, sometimes we talk at students about principles of community. Sometimes we stand up here on a stage and we say, this is what our student body should aspire to be. But really what we should be doing is standing with our students in personal conversations and talking about what they mean to us directly. So being able to say, this is something that I experienced here or a friend experienced here that made me feel unwelcome or not included, and then saying, this is what I'm going to do to be an ally to you in your identities, that makes the student feel much more comfortable with sharing their experiences and sharing, what they believe is important to them. And I hope that through events like our Building Our Community that I talked about earlier, we can find those small places where students can understand each other in a personal environment.
One of my favorite principles of community is the honest and respectful expression of ideas. Quite simply, I think we need to encourage more public discussion on these social issues. And if anyone is too afraid to share the fringe ideas that sparked the Students Against Racism protests, I think it's very clear that those fringe ideas are not even worth considering.
What, in your opinion, should the ideal vice president look like and comport themselves with regards to both internal and external affairs? Starting with Anyan.
I believe the vice president carries the weight of both the president's roles and supporting him or her in their duties, and also going to administration and then back to Senate and saying, this is what we talked about. We need to be able to understand what is going on at an administration level and then bringing it back and making it understandable for both our senators and then our students. So in the next year, whoever is vice president would need to be able to effectively chair Senate meetings and then go out into our community and talk about what went on in a fair and unbiased manner.
Eisenstein?
I agree with what you said. I also think an important detail to add is to make sure it's kept concise and kept easy to understand, because unfortunately, if you don't do that, a lot of messages can get lost in translation, so to speak.
Yeah, the role of vice president is primarily one about empowering other people to succeed. What I bring to the table as someone who has the most experience in student government is being able to provide context, to background, to give context to people who are in the cabinet, for Morgan when she's president, so that I can make sure that whoever I'm working with is empowered to succeed. The vice president has, it chairs the Senate meeting, and I feel like I could do that well, but it's a whole lot more than that, and it's about being there and advocating for students and giving other people the ability to do the same.
I would just add that experience at Iowa State is just as necessary as experience within student government. We have people who, like we mentioned earlier, don't understand what student government does, and while it's good to have that knowledge base about student government procedures, it doesn't mean as much as knowing what Iowa State students are feeling. So being able to understand their needs and go out and talk to them and feel comfortable having those conversations about what they value is just as important as knowing what Senate values and what student government needs.
This question is directed at Anyang. You mentioned earlier in the debate that you wanted ISU 101 to be optional because you did not want to extend the stay of students at Iowa State. However, on your platform, you want to expand the number of required credits for the diversity requirement. Can you explain why you're willing to mandate more classes for students if you don't want to extend a student's stay at the university?
To be clear, we do not want to mandate extra credits for students. Rather, we want to refine what students are taking in order for them to get a more well-rounded education. We want them to understand their different identities in their community so that their education is more focused and that they're able to go out into their broader communities understanding of their peers.
This next question is, next and last actually, is for Schrader. Last year, you authored a resolution in the Senate endorsing the House File 316 bill, a controversial bill in the Iowa legislature that allowed clubs to set requirements to participate in their leadership, otherwise known as freedom of association. Why did you support this bill?
Let's be clear. Senate File 274 was the bill that passed. It was similar to the House file. But I supported this because I support the constitutional rights as given in the First Amendment and the ability for clubs to be able to have belief-based requirements to ensure their clubs continue to be about how they're founded. That bill had bipartisan support down at the Iowa legislature, meaning both Republicans and Democrats voted for it. And let's be clear, there was a misconception that this bill would allow identity-based discrimination. That was nowhere in the bill. It was belief-based, meaning that a Catholic club could say, hey, we like Schrader a lot, but he's not Catholic, so we don't want him leading Bible studies or teaching in the name of our club. This is really important for religious clubs because most of their people in their leadership go out and teach, and they need to be able to have the ability to regulate what they're teaching to assure that it goes with the doctrine of their denomination of their faith. So I support that bill because I support students' rights, and I support the ability of clubs to actually have purpose and reasons for existing.
Did you go? Okay. While I believe that it's important to have these conversations about beliefs, I also do realize that we want to value students of all backgrounds here. And belief-based systems, as well-intentioned as they may be, give student leaders and give organizations an opportunity to discriminate based on students' backgrounds. And we don't want to see students who are passionate in these positions be denied because somebody didn't believe that their beliefs didn't line up with them specifically.
Did you have a rebuttal, Eisenstein?
Oh, no, I did not.
Okay.
The rights for clubs to associate with whom they please is clearly protected in the Constitution. The University of Iowa has decided to ignore this repeatedly. They have lost a lawsuit. They are in the middle of losing another lawsuit where their individual university administrators are having to pay out of their own pockets because the court ruled that this was such a violation of students' rights and freedoms. That's not something that I want at Iowa State, and I'm proud that our university has not decided to go down that path of losing multiple lawsuits trying to attack student rights.
Okay, now moving on to our final section on general questions. Starting with Eisenstein, what do you think is the most important responsibility a vice president would have?
The most important responsibility would be to work hand in hand with the president of the government of the student body. I've known Mr. Luke Barnes for quite a while now. I have a lot of trust in him. I think him and I really like to work together.
I believe that the most important part of being the vice president of student government is to create awareness for the unity and health of our community. Going back to the platform points that we have mentioned, these all are ways that we can go out in our community and better the students directly. Not sitting in our meetings and just saying that what we pass here is for student government, but we are including all students as part of student government, as that is our mission.
Yeah. And the most important job for any vice president is working with the president to ensure that their administration makes the university better for everyone on this campus. And that is a hard goal to do, but that's something that Morgan and I are committed to following through with. When it comes to accessibility, campus climate, and sustainability, these are things that impact everybody. And that's why we're really excited to have the opportunity to get to work, So please, so we want to get to work on this, and we want to get to work as soon as we can, which is why we've already been meeting with university administration. We've already been meeting with students. So on day one, if we're sworn into office, that we can get rolling and make sure that our student body, presidency and vice presidency is an effective one that helps all students across this university and isn't just one focused on student government.
In what capacity will you be involved in student government if you are not elected, starting with Schrader?
I don't know. I would like to be on the SciRide Board of Trustees still. I think I bring a lot of experience to that. I've been on that board for 2 years as we've kind of transitioned from a growing organization to one of a declining enrollment. And I've really been proud of the leadership I've been able to bring to that board and making sure that student concerns and perspectives are brought into those meetings and to ensure that we're not being outspent because the university and the city have less of budget constraints than us students do. So being able to be in that board and to articulate exactly what students need and how much we can afford is really important, and I would be certainly willing to keep providing that experience on the SciRide Board of Trustees.
Arnaud?
Well, if I wasn't elected, I'd like to be that annoying uncle at student government events, whether it's through a cabinet position or just stopping in for meetings and sharing my opinions because, again, I'm a student, which is the general, every single student is a part of student government. So I am in full belief that the platform that we have, no matter if we're elected or not, we are hoping to get it enacted, whether it's parts of it or the entirety of it. I know ISU 101, like Schrader mentioned earlier, is something that's already coming in the fall. So we'd love for student government to be a part of these processes and to continue to work with administration, no matter what role I have.
Well, as I said before, assuming I'm elected, I would still like to continue my participation in the Air Force ROTC program, though I, again, must note all opinions are entirely my own. I would also like to continue my job at the College of Veterinary Medicine Computer Support Office because there's nothing I like more than helping students and faculty when they're having computer meltdowns.
Okay, and our final question. Can you share an example of when you were a catalyst who brought groups of polarized opinions together so that all voices were at the table? Starting with Anyan.
On February 20th, we'll be holding this year's Building Our Community. I mentioned it in our opening announcements and again during the debate. But when I first was a part of this event, we saw students who were from Iowa, we saw students who were international students, multicultural students, of every single imaginable background, and professors of similar backgrounds who all talked and brought their own individual ideas to the table. That's the way that we are able to have a unified community who can understand these issues and prevent campus climate issues like we saw in the fall. If people are discussing their differences before going and posting messages or expressing themselves in a way that offends others, then they're more likely to think about others' feelings before they actually act.
Sorry, can you repeat the question one more time, please?
Yes. The question was, in what capacity? Can you share an example of when you were a catalyst who brought groups together with polarized opinions so that all voices were at the table?
Unfortunately, I can't, because every single time my friends and I have tried to do just that, people on the other end have not answered the call, so to speak.
Yeah, so the summer before I came to Iowa State, I represented the United States as part of Team USA on an international NASA competition where we designed a space settlement and presented that to a team of NASA engineers. On my team, we had Americans, we had Chinese, we had Indians, and we had Romanians. But we had to work together, we had to get over our cultural differences, and in 2 days we had to design a hypothetical settlement on Venus and present that to NASA scientists. That was a really hard task to do, from people that didn't know each other, from different countries and backgrounds, to bring them together. But we tried, and I think we did a great job, and we ended up winning that competition among all the other teams because we were the team that stuck together. When it got tough, when we had to make decisions about what we were going to cut or what we wouldn't, we made sure we had someone from every nationality in the room so that groups didn't feel like they were being ignored. And I think that's the experience at Iowa State. We have a lot of different people from different cultures and backgrounds, and I'm really excited to be able to work from those people to see what they can bring to the table.
All right, that concludes the question portion of our debate. We will give 90 seconds for each candidate to give their final closing statement. We'll start with Eisenstein, go to Schrader, and then Hanyang.
Well, as I said, I like to keep this concise. Thank you very much for listening to my opinion.
Okay, I would like to thank everyone who came today. I would like to thank our fellow candidates, especially birthday boy Senator Hanyang for coming out on his birthday. But this is a key time for our student body. Declining enrollment is just one of the challenges that the next student body president and vice president will have to face. During my 3 years in student government, I worked on over 40 projects and initiatives. Not all of them worked out, but a lot of them did. And a lot of them are things that we can be proud of and that made campus a better place. That experience makes me really excited to see what we can do with our platform that has tangible actions that lead to concrete results that improve the campus for all students and not just the ones that historically are supported by student government. Morgan and I understand that the student body deserves strong and effective leadership in this time because, quite simply, there's not a lot of time to waste. There are key actions that need to be taken in the areas of affordability, sustainability, and campus climate. And that's why we've already started working with administrators. So on day one, when we show up, we can make sure that our student body presidency and vice presidency is the most effective and accomplishes the most that we possibly can for all students. That's why Morgan and I are asking for your votes on March 3rd and 4th, because we believe that campus is greater with Fritz and Schrader.
Well, like Vice Speaker Schrader said, I'd like to thank both Election Commission for setting up this event, for my peers on stage for having such a wonderful discussion about our ideas, and I believe that all of us are committed to ISU and its students. But I'd like to bring our focus back to what our students have said they need: unity and health of our community. Iowa State was founded as a land-grant institution so that campus was inclusive of everyone, no matter their backgrounds. Student government must do the same. We must keep campus accessible for all students, and our actions must keep a healthy environment prioritized so that all students can come in and feel comfortable expressing, living, and learning. Earlier in October, we did have the largest meeting that I was ever a part of, and I remember saying at the end of that night that I would have loved to have more students always in that meeting and that we would always have the room filled. As Vice President and as Lydia as President, we believe that all students should have the right to come in and deserve the opportunity to come in and speak about these issues. We want clear communication and accountability from our student leaders and from administration, and we want respect for all the backgrounds that we share. We can debate all night about campus safety and affordability, but we do need to respect the health and wellness of all students and their inclusion in this campus environment. I'm running for Vice President because our service in student government is owed to all of the students and what they say is most important to them. So I thank you for your attention tonight, and I hope that we can raise the standard on March 3rd and 4th.
All right, so that concludes our vice presidential debate. Come out to our presidential debate, which will be on the 25th, next Tuesday. vote for the elections on March 3rd and 4th. The website for the voting is on vote.iastate.edu. And for more information about elections, you can find that on the elections website on the student government page. In addition, if you'd like to run for Senate, that is still an option. And so you need to attend an informative session. You can talk to me, talk to Election Commission, and we will organize an informative session for you. And then you just need to turn in your statement of intent on Friday. Thank you all for coming.